YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So I got something a little different today. You know, I like me Tamiya touring cars, so I thought why not take a punt on one of these things that are listed on Aliexpress. So basically we get a set of drift wheels which may or may not have a crack at drift racing. Depends if I can find anybody else interested, but the other thing we get is this, and I must admit, let's get rid of the box. So when I saw this thing listed, I weren't exactly sure what to expect, especially with the price that they listed at. I mean, this comes, you can get it on offer from time to time, but it basically comes as a 90% built RC. As you see here is how it comes out box. You need to put the oil in the dampers, and you need to supply a motor, an pinion, a servo, and your radio gear. But this comes with carbon battery tie down, carbon chassis, and all the aluminium bits you can see. And to be fair, there's not much slack in the steering at all. So it looks like, to best I can tell, this is based on a TT-01E. All the aluminium all seems to fit really nice, and there's very little play in it. You've also got carbon front and rear shock towers, fully adjustable oil damp suspension, but as I say, you have to put the oil in it. All aluminium out drives and everything, and fully bearinged. And it's also got bearings in the steering, and then a few brass bushings. But the only bit of play I can see is a slight bit of play in these olives, which they're aluminium, you're going to get that. But it does come with two bumpers, and I'm not sure if these are meant to attach front and rear. So let's get these open and I'll have a look. Right, so it does look like it comes with both front and rear, and you do get all the screws to mount each one. So I believe it will just be a case of sticking the screws in and screwing them into the actual chassis. So let's see if I can get one of these fitted rather than throwing it all around the room. So I get them screwed in, but basically that's how they're going to go. So we'll get them tightened down. So that's his rear bumper put into place, and then the front one, I'm just going to want to flip it upside down, and we get this in exactly the same. So it literally just 3 screws into 3 holes. So that's his front and rear bumper on. It's looking more like a sort of a real car. You do get the hexes and the wheel nuts with it, and these are the aluminium hexes. So let's have a look how all these go together. I have noticed on each of the output shafts it's got a little rubber O-ring, so I'm not sure if that's just to hold it in place or if they intend you fitting these with it, but let's have a look. So if we pull the drive shaft up to seat the bearing in properly, then we need to pop the drive pin through, but then it does have that little O-ring, which that ain't gonna work. So I'm not entirely sure what they're on there for, but that certainly works. Yeah, that drive pin, that X drive sits all the way down on the drive pin. So I'm going to drop these little O-rings off and get the rest of the drive shafts, drive pins and hexes put on. So that's all as hexes on. Let's have a look what else we get. So you get a bunch of body mounts. So these you could believe they'd fasten on inside or the outside, so it depends what shell you're putting on. And you do just get these little screws that we're going to have to pop through and screw it in. I think just to try these I'm going to put it on outside, but basically you just fasten them all on like that. So we'll get rest on. Right, so once you've got them held on with the top screws, you just need to go around putting the bottom ones in. So I'll get all them fastened in and see what else we've got. So we're going to need shocks off because we've got to fill them up, and you're going to need shocks off to get these bottom screws in. So let's very quickly whip some of these shocks off. So there's just one screw to take out, and let's have a look how that's fastened in. So the little ball joint just pops out, and then we should be able to screw his shock caps off. So yeah, they are proper damped shocks with proper bladders in. So while we've got that off, I'll pop the last screw in to this mount. And then we need some shock oil. So let's have a look what we've got for it. So just to try it, I'm just going to stick some, what I've got kicking around, I'm just going to put some 600 CST in. And then you just want to move them through the range of movement, and hopefully it'll stay stood up where I've put it and will not get covered in shock oil. So we'll drop this one off, drop his long screw out. Not sure if we can get the cap off. Yeah, you can get cap off without removing the little alloy part. So we'll do the same with this. In fact, let's get the body post holder. So we get that screwed on, then we'll get some shock oil in. I'll just top that one off. And need a little tiny bit more in there. I'd just like to fill them up so it just starts coming out as you're screwing your cap back on, and then you know you've got the best chance of getting the least amount possible of air trapped in it. So once we've got that back in, we're going to need a little olive popping back on. Yep, that's the easiest way of doing it. And as stock, these are mounted in the top outermost holes. So we get this one put back on. And we get this one topped off. And to be honest, for a pretty much pre-built RC, this is pretty impressive so far. So we've just got to do exactly the same on the rear. So it's both these screws out, your screws into your body post mounts, just screw tops off and fill shocks up. So we'll crack on with that. Right, so we've got a decent looking RC. Next thing we're going to need to do is get a servo for it. So let's have an hunt round and see what we've got. So servo wise, seems though we've got a really nice budget sort of RC. I'm going to go with a really nice budget servo and servo arm. So we'll be running one of the 25 kilogram 9i mod and a little metal cheap servo arm with it. So let's get this and a receiver, get it centered, and see if it lines up and fits with the servo mount and the steering assembly. Right, so once we've got it bound up, make sure it's centered, make sure everything's centered on your transmitter. Right, now let's see if we can get it positioned somewhere where it's going to suit this RC. Does look like it'll fit, so that's not going to be a problem. So on this chassis it is set up quite nice, as in one of your post mounts is fixed and the other one is on a slider. So once we've got these out, we're going to look which way a servo arm wants to fit. So if we're going to sit this all the way down, it's going to want to fit on that side, and it looks like the height's about right for that arm. Basically for this you're just going to use whatever servo screw comes with your servo, and I like to nip them down, then tighten these two up, and once you've got the two pinch bolts fully tight you can crank that one down. So we're going to need some screws to mount our servo. Now it does look like this servo comes with some screws, but I'm not entirely sure what size they are. And I think probably going to be... no, we're in luck. The screws that the actual servo comes with are the perfect size, what you're going to need to mount it to this RC, which is really nice. So let's get these mounted. So that's one. I think looking at this, the only screws that I'm going to have to source is for the motor mount. So once we've got them in, we're going to have to flip the RC and get us servo mounted. So that's got a servo in. Now let's have a look what we're going to need to mount this. So luckily, because of the servo arm that we're using on this, we don't need to use the lock nut. We can just thread straight into it. So let's just move this to one side and get this tightened down. So it certainly looks like we'll have no problem with the servo travel and getting full lock on these. So that's quite nice. And there actually looks to be probably less play in these than the TT-02 I've got. I mean, you are going to have some because they're all metal parts, but that's not too bad. Bearing in mind this kit is £87. So next thing we're going to have to look at is motor and pinion. So let's see what we've got kicking around. So I think for this one I'm going to go with, it's going to be raced in the kind of stock Tamiya touring class. So I think I'm going to go for one of these nice LRP motors. And if I look, let's see how it's going to line up. yeah, it looks like it'll line up so we can have the sort of nice sticker where we want it. So we're going to have to source some screws to mount the motor, and you need to make sure that they're not too long and they don't go through and hit the actual rotor. So let me find some screws. So looking at this, to get the motor on, I think we're going to need the rear bumper off, which may have been more obvious to me, but I've never built a TT-01. So I've got two little screws, but not sure how much room we've got through to this motor mount. So that looks like I'm going to be able to get at least one of them in. Just need to make sure these screws aren't that long that they're going to hit us rotor. Doesn't feel like it. So it looks like the motor screws we are going to be able to get to. We just need a pinion fitted. So we do have a 22, and this is a stock Tamiya one. So it's definitely the same pitch as a stock Tamiya. So let's see if we can line it up on the actual motor shaft itself. This bit shouldn't be too difficult. So this motor's got quite a long shaft, so I think the pinion on in reverse is probably going to work better on this one. So it looks like that's lined up perfect. Now we just need to see if we can set the meshing. So that feels nice. Now can we get to these screws to tighten them up? Can certainly use a standard MIP driver for the top one, and the ball joint one works better for the bottom. And we don't have any tight spots on that pinion, but I think I'm just going to nip it up ever so slightly. It's quite a nice motor mount to work with. So that's got tiny bit of play, but it does fit. So next thing we're going to have to look into is whereabouts we're going to put as receiver and as ESC. And for the ESC, I'm going to be running the Hobbywing 1080, but the second generation. And you don't really get an awful lot with this. So we're going to have to look at what battery we're wanting to run, and certainly going to have to shorten these motor cables. So they're going to be for a receiver. Then we've got a power switch that we're going to have to fasten in somewhere. Then we're going to need somewhere to put as actual receiver. Now I think if that fastens in there, it's out the way of the motor shaft. We've got plenty of room for his battery lead to not get tied up. So that's not going to get tied up in as ESC or as steering. And then I can bring them up and over, or we can go that way round. And then I'm going to have to massively shorten our power cables. But it does make it really awkward to get to the programming port. And programming is something I'd like to be able to reach. So I think I'm going to go that way, leaving programming port out. And then we've got plenty of space to mount our receiver and put all his wires. And if we need to put a fan on it, we've got plenty of room. So let's get them stuck in. Right, so that's how we're sitting at minute. we got his motor in, battery will fit there. Do need to shorten these power cables quite a bit, and also put a Dean's T-plug on because that's what I'm running in these touring cars. So I'm going to shorten these cables down. That'll get them nice and tidy. Or depends if I want to run shorty packs in these. Let's have a look. I think I'll probably just end up running the Tamiya style lipos because I'm not running a crazy powerful motor. But you do have the option of running stick packs if you want. They will fit. So maybe I'll just shorten this ESC down just a little bit in case I want to put post adapters on it and run it on the bigger packs. Just depends how I feel. So I'll probably take them. In fact, if I cut that now, then I know the right length. So, another plug we don't need. So basically, I just need to get my Dean's T-plug on there, because that's where I'm going to be running. Still not sure if I'm going to shorten these a bit more, because I can always extend them. And I think most of my charge cables, if I have a look, so yeah, most of the charge cables I've got for the other packs I use, most of these all come with Tamiya Dean's T-plug, which means they're easily going to be long enough. So I think I will shorten these cables right down, just so we don't have wires flapping around everywhere, because that's definitely going to be long enough even if I'm running a one of the other race packs. So we need that shortened down, and I need to get these wires soldered to the motor. So I'll get them on, get us a Dean's T-plug on so we've got some way of powering it, and see what else we need. So all we need to do is put the rear bumper back on now. We've got the shocks filled, we've got a steering, we've got a motor in. We've got it set for forward and brake. But what else are we going to need? We need to set as endpoints, and I'm going to split the front so I can check the diff. I'm going to put 1 million diff fluid in the front, and I think I'm going to put 5,000 in the rear. So let's see what we need to do to get that. So looking at it, once we drop the front bumper off, the front diff casing, let's see if we can get it without stripping too much of the RC down. So we've got 2 screws on the top. So once these 2 are out, I think we've just got this centre one that should then let the shock mount come off completely. So that's got a shock mount off. I think just to make my life easier, I'm going to drop one of these shocks off, and then I can flip that completely out of the way. Now what else holds these on? I think it's the 2 bottom screws on these. So we've then got 2 screws in the bottom. Looks like we're going to have to remove the back 2, or at least draw them out so far to let us lift the diff casing. And then I think we've just got the two on the top that might be holding this or stopping us getting this out. No. So we can remove his diff that way. Then I'm just going to drop one of these diff cups out. And we've just got 3 screws that hold the diff together. And we do have a full metal diff. So if we get some 1 million diff fluid, and we should just be able to squash some of this in there. It's going to be easier said than done. Because if you've ever worked with this 1 million diff fluid, it's a bit like concrete. You basically just have to pack it in. And we've got us 3 little screws to put back in, line the 3 tabs up in the diff. And there's not really any worry of it coming out, because yeah, it's pretty much in there once it's in. So if we get everything more or less lined up, we should be able to drop everything back in place. And then if you just want to make sure that both your front and rear axles got the same direction when you spin them, then you know you've got your diff in the right place. If not, it goes to that side. One thing I will do while I'm in here though, I'm going to put a little bit of black grease on here just to keep things lubed up a bit. There is some grease on there, but can't hurt dropping a little bit more back in. Then we're going to need to close it up, and you've got to line all 4 of the suspension arms up and then just pop it back in. And it's probably going to be easier looking at this. Let's get us suspension back on. And then we can put all the screws back in to hold this together. Just check it, make sure it's still nice and free, and then we'll just get his bottom screws back in. And then while we're at it, I'm going to drop the back. So I'll just back these 2 out. And remove these. Then I'm going to do the same as on the front, because that seemed to make life really easy. So I'll just drop one of these off. Now we've got the 3 screws, 1 short, 2 long ones. Then if it's like the front, we should be able to move that down just enough to get it open. Nope, that's not going to come up. So might have to do the top screws as well. So I've just loosened the 4 of them off. See if that'll let it come up enough. Yep, that's it. So once we've got that off, we can remove the diff. And again, just want to take these 3 screws out. We can pop that off, and I just want to stiffen this up a little bit. So I'm just going to drop some 5000 CST in here. It's already got some pretty thick grease in, so I just want to give it a bit of a hand. If you line the little tabs up, we should then be able to pop us 3 screws back in, and then we just need to try and get all his drive shafts and everything back together. Which is always a lot of fun. And again, you just want to check, make sure your wheels are all driving the same direction, or this gear to that side. Now I've got quite a bit of diff grease come out, and that'll grease his gears, so I don't need to put any more on that one. And we can start popping everything back together. Then lastly, we need to get the shock tightened up, and then we just need to drop our front and rear mudguard bumpers back on. So I'll quickly get these screwed in. Right, so basically we have got at least the startings of a fairly decent Tamiya sort of spec touring car. Got a nice battery mount. We've got his cables in tidy. So we've just got to set as endpoints up and as steering, but that's looking pretty good so far. So all that's left to do is you just need to choose what wheels and what body shell you're putting on it. But for a fairly inexpensive build, you would have a quite competitive touring car. It does come with the wheel nuts, it does come with the drift wheels, so you can stick them on it if you want. But basically any 1/10 touring car wheels are just going to fit straight on it. You've already got quite nice feeling suspension, to be fair to it. That doesn't feel bad at all. I think it's currently riding a bit high, so you might want to put some spacers into the shocks to bring them down a bit, lower it down. But you've certainly got the basics of a decent touring car. Now I think you're talking about, say, £70-ish for the motor and speed controller, about 33 quid for the servo. Batteries are only £20 and the kit is less than £90 delivered for the entire chassis. So the only thing you'd need to provide is a body shell and whatever wheels you want to be running. So not a bad little kit, and should be a pretty decent little touring car as well. Right, so this is the final incarnation of the setup that I've gone for. So I've put a slight toe out on the front. We've got the 5000 CST oil in the shocks, which feel really nice. We've got all the electronics fitted, and they're all on the 3M lock tape. So if I need to take out that, I can just pop it off. The Z batteries and the Gens Ace batteries fit it perfect, but so do the bigger sort of stick packs if you want to run off them. The front diff, we've got the 1 million CST, so it's almost like a lock diff. Back, we've gone for 500,000. And to be honest, it's a really impressive setup. We've got the aluminium wheels, and I'll put a link to these. These fit it absolutely perfectly. We've got the Schumacher Contact 30 compound tyres, so it should handle pretty good as a touring car. At the moment, I've not dropped the ride height, but if you wanted to, you could just get a few spacers and put them in the shocks to limit it down a bit. There's no droop screws or anything to adjust. The general quality of it is absolutely fantastic. I've had no screws strip or anything while I've been working on it. I've put the magnetic, little magnetic body mounts on the rear, purely because I just ain't got any extensions long enough for the shell that I'm going to be using. I've moved the front body posts out forward, just so it sort of lines up better with this shell. The rear, I've put 9mm increase X drives on it, and the front I'm running stock. It's quite nice that you've got quite a lot of thread left on these output shafts. Does give you quite a lot of option for wheel offset. But what we've gone for on this one is one of the L&L bodies. So this is a Sierra 500 Cosworth, and as you see, the rear just sits down on the magnetic clips. It's quite a flared out body shell at the back. I kind of feel like these should be in a bit more, but just what the L&L body shells are like. But it does sit quite well. Ride height's nice. We've got your standard body clips on the front. So all in all, as a very cheap alternative and quite a high quality alternative to a Tamiya TT-01, As you see, the bumper fits really well with front, not so much with back, but it is a big body shell, this. But yeah, this is quite a nice car. To say you're only looking at £87 for the actual kit delivered, in UK at least, and it does come with a nice aluminium post mounts. You've got some really nice aluminium parts on it. The shocks feel absolutely fantastic. You have got adjustable turnbuckles on the steering, but they're the kind where you have to pop it off and adjust. They're not, they don't have the adjusting nut in the middle, but you can change them if you want. Plenty of space to mount a transponder as well. The 99 mod servo, not sure how you're meant to pronounce it, but really impressed with it. So if we just fire the Noble Pro up, but you could just as easily pair this with the G7P, and it would keep the cost down even more. But as you see, the steering, this servo is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't even slow it down with really sticky rubber tyres on a sticky rubber Traxxas mat. And the Hobbywing 1080 G2 ESC, really well suited to it. And this little LRP motor is fantastic. Plenty of braking. And all I've fitted on this at the moment is a 22 tooth pinion. There is quite a bit of gap at the end of adjustment, so you could go up even more on it. But I'm just going to try it with this as it is. And the wheel speed that's got, it's going to be quick enough for any Tamiya touring car class. But yeah, overall, really impressed, even down to the carbon sort of retainers for the bumpers, the carbon bar, carbon battery bracket, carbon chassis. It's a really nice build. It does come fully ball raced. There are metal gears in the diffs. You've also got the aluminium drive shaft and all aluminium dog bones and drive cups, both the outer cup from the diff and the wheel axles, all aluminium. It's fully ball raced all the way through, including this mount for the steering. The smaller ones are brass bushings, and the steering arm that comes with the servo fits really well. It keeps a really nice straight angle through all the steering. But yeah, really impressed with it. Can't wait to try this one and see how it goes. But let's get the body shell back on. So really impressed with this. It does look really nice, and for a budget build, quite impressed. I will put links in the description of every part we've used on this. Body shell wise, if you wanted to keep the cost down, you could go with ones off of Aliexpress. They start at about 15 quid delivered, and they come pre-painted, so you've not even got the cost of painting, and I believe they're even the wheel arches are cut out pre-done. So it's just a drop-on body shell. You just have to put your mount holes. As I said, if you wanted to keep the cost down, you could also go with the Flascar G7P. That would be a cracking transmitter to pair with this RC, and it's plenty good enough for racing. It'll go up to 400 Hz, I believe, for servo refresh rate, so no problems running any at digital servos. You could go with a Core RC, about 25 turn motor. They're about £9.99. And you could also go with the cheaper ESC, which would again bring cost down even further. I think these retail around 50 quid for the 1080 G2s, but you could go all the way down to one of the really basic ones, like what come with Tamiyas. Just trying to see if I've got any kicking around here. So you could go with a Tamiya ESC and a Tamiya motor if you wanted, or a Core RC and the... Pretty sure I've got some kicking around here somewhere. But basically the little tiny Hobbywing ESC, they're about $19.99 retail. So you could go down that route, and you could go with an even cheaper servo. But I think this setup that I've gone for, with it being a nice carbon and alloy chassis, we've gone for some nice wheels, even though these are dirt cheap, but they are nice wheels. The build I've gone for is something that I feel would be competitive and reliable in the sort of brushed touring car class. But thanks again for watching WTF Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.